In this video, I'm going to show you some things that you should not do when trying to remotely view your security camera system. There's a few settings that customers like to get into and enable and lock themselves out of their systems from remote viewing, or locking themselves out from accessing their system over their local network. So first I'm going to right click. I'm going to click the main menu. Log in using the graphical user password. This is just the factory default password. Down here in the bottom we can see there's a settings tab, and then there is a network, and then also a security tab. These are two places where customers like to go into and start to enable things or switch around numbers or move sliders that can really end up doing some damage or causing themselves to lock themselves out. First, we're going to cover some of the basic network settings that people can mess up. So I'm going to click on network. In here in the TCP IP screen, there is a handful of settings here. You would come in here and click the modify button and enable DHCP if you were following our dummies guide. If you were setting up port forwarding, you would set a static IP address, and this can confuse a lot of customers. Of course, if you don't know how to set up IP addresses, just click the DHCP button and make sure it's enabled. A lot of times when some people are trying to set up the P2P method, they either miss this step or they don't completely click the DHCP button and then click OK and then click apply. So make sure you are coming in here, enabling that DHCP button, clicking OK, and then keep clicking apply. This virtual host setting here seems to be on by default. Sometimes this setting can mess with your P2P remote viewing or your port forwarding, and you can simply click this to turn it off as well if you don't want to have that virtual host setting enabled. Some other settings in here, you never want to mess around with the port settings. You want to leave these as default ports. Otherwise, you may forget what you set these ports to and lock yourself out remotely. Some other settings that people end up messing with here can be under the switch setting. This switch setting is for your cameras. This switch setting should never be changed. Leave the switch setting alone. Of course, finally, you would come in here to the P2P setting. Currently, my NVR is not connected to my network, so I have an offline status here, but you want to leave this P2P status enabled if you are following our dummies guide. It's very, very, very important. So I am going to go down to the bottom right here and click back to back out of these settings. And like I mentioned before, the security tab is another place where customers like to mess around and create trouble for themselves. So we're going to click on the security tab. In here at the top, I'm going to see there's a security status. You can normally leave this alone. If this yellow status here for configuration, this is just for HTTPS, which is used for a web browser. This is covered in a separate guide on our blog, and I'm not going to cover that. But if you're not worried about HTTPS, or you're not worried about accessing your system over a web browser, leave these settings alone. I'm going to right click to get out of this notification. And as you can see, all of these settings are green. That means they're okay. But for some reason, some customers still find the need to go in here and mess with these settings. Some of those settings include attack defense. As long as you are the only one with your password, you are the only one with your serial number, you are the only one with your external IP address, no one is going to be able to access your system other than you. Once you start to give that information out to other people, then it might spread around and those people might be able to access your system. In which case, you can leave all of these settings disabled. As long as you keep your password, your serial number, or your external IP address safe, leave these settings disabled. This one is a common setting that people enable. On this newer interface or this new NVR, it's called firewall. On older ones, it's called blacklist, whitelist, or IP filter. Leave it disabled. As you can see here, I have it disabled. Blue means it's enabled. Leave it disabled and click the apply button. The next tab is account lockout. You can change how many times the system allows you to try to log in with the incorrect password. We recommend leaving this to 5 attempts. Sometimes you might type your password in incorrectly or not do the graphical password quite correctly. And then you can of course change out the lock time. You can make it longer or shorter. You can also reboot your NVR if you do lock yourself out in front of it. Anti-DOS attack, don't worry about these unless you're making children angry on the internet and they're going to send a DDoS attack to your IP address. Sync time allow list, again, more advanced settings that you should leave disabled. Some other settings here include audio video transmission. If you don't know what you're doing with audio video transmission encryption, do not enable this setting. It will mess with your remote viewing. Last but not least, here is a security warning. You could probably leave these enabled. You want to make sure if there's any security exceptions, you want it to at least log in your system, possibly show a message, and it could also send you an email alert. These settings I would recommend leaving on. Also, illegal login settings that you can leave on. So again, if you come in here to the security settings and you make a lot of changes, you do have the potential to lock yourself out. Since these are all green already, there is no real need to come in here and configure any of these settings. If one of them does happen to come up with a yellow flag, feel free to reach out to our support team before making any changes to the security settings on your NVR or DVR. Hopefully this video shows you what settings you should leave alone. That way you don't lock yourself out of your system. Thank you for watching.